Chris King, a very familiar face on the coast, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. Welcome to Commercial HQ's boardroom and to Business Insider. Thanks for your time.
Well, a great facility and a great organisation with Business Insider, so congratulations. I believe you're getting a lot of those.
Thank you.
So you should, you and Bob. It's a fantastic undertaking, and it's a real pleasure to be here.
Thank you for that. Let's get down to it. You know, a relatively new arrival in the Central Coast tourism.
Yeah, my first day job ever.
First proper job.
I got a real job.
Did you get to tell your parents?
Yeah, no. Well, unfortunately they've gone. You know, they would have been very proud of me. It's only taken 50 odd years to get a real job. You know, which is terrific.
But we all find it. We all find it, and you're enjoying it. So let's talk about that. Since you've arrived, you know, you've had some strategies to execute.
I have. Well, I guess I've got to give credit where credit's due, and that's certainly got to be to Oliver Philpott, our CEO, that landed, and without getting into all the argy-bargy of it, has landed at Central Coast Tourism about 18 months ago and put in place some great things, a destination management plan so we could really see what we were, because I, just as an outsider, often thought, gee, we talk about the scenic Central Coast, but what does that actually mean? So the destination management plan was in place, and there's been outworkings of that. For me, an event strategy was done with a lot of consultation and a great university student who put all that together, and that was then, and part of that identified having an events manager. So to carry that out, to execute that, as it turned out, the Flora Festival, Tony Collins had retired from the Flora Festival, and there was an opportunity there, thanks to Trade and Investment, to create my job. So I'm the business and tourism events manager of Central Coast Tourism. And already there, and I sort of thought to myself, gee, well, I know about events, I've got to go and get that happening, so I had a bit of a way forward there. But my job essentially is to attract and go and work with all of our stakeholders to attract corporate and business tourism here. Okay. Now,
we might come back to that,
yeah,
but
sure.
I'd love to talk about the Flora Festival while it's still
Well, it's over. It's over.
And fresh.
And fresh, very fresh, yeah.
So high points and low points of that?
High points. Look, high points were that we were able to undertake it in fairly, and I guess after 25 years when you have a festival like that, being so dependent on weather and all of that being out in the open, you're always going to have some challenges. Well, I guess after 25 years, I had the ball presented to me and I took it on with a good committee, and certainly having the Central Coast Tourism management construction behind it was great. But there certainly were some challenges, and I guess the biggest challenge, and it's not by way of a criticism, is that we, with all of the change and everything, change of governments, change of this, change of that, the event side at Mount Penang Parklands has not been developed. And as I say, I don't want to go back into all the argy-bargy about it, it's just not developed. So this year, for the first time, I was faced with the challenge of having to provide power, temporary power, fencing, and some other toilets. There is some toilets there. And you think, oh, well, that can't be a bigger challenge. But we're talking about $80,000, $90,000 before we start.
On a total budget of?
Oh, well, you know, up around the $500,000.
So, yeah, you're talking 20% impact at that level.
Yeah,
so.
and it is. And so that was a challenge. And of course, you know, in previous years it had been provided by the Festival Development Corp and then Regional Development Corp. And this year that wasn't available to us. I've got to say the Regional Development Corp was very helpful in a lot of ways, fantastic, but it just wasn't available. The current economic crisis, trying to get sponsorship, even the Water Authority, who by way of sponsorship through that organisation with both councils was going through a restructure, and it presented, timing is everything, and of course, you know, we'd had great sponsorship, so that was the big challenge.
Yeah. Okay, can we, in just commercial terms, were you, how did it finish up this year's?
Well, it finished up, we're still, I would say, going through that process, so I don't want to sort of put too fine a point on it. But it should finish up with the committee, and remember it is a committee that actually owns the festival, with some money in their account. Now, you know, that's certainly due to, I think, some very good management, and I don't want to pat ourselves on the back, but
you should.
Some financial responsibility from the committee and Central Coast Tourism and myself to really try and rein in the budget. The gods conspired pretty well. We had one bad day, but
the rest of
Friday. I got the Friday. And with the provision the committee had with some money in the bank, we you know, maybe it's probably too much to say we dodged a bullet, but we certainly, that's where we end up. Where we go to from there is the big question that everyone's asked me. So, is there going to be a Flora Festival? And of course, if you read the local papers, we needed to clarify with Gosford Council about a guarantee that had been in place, etc., etc. So again, I guess it comes back to what you and I discussed earlier before we got on camera. about the will. And from my point of view, if there's a will, then we'll have the festival. We've undertaken, there was a Trade and Investment gave us some money to do a study and some research and some recommendations on where the festival would go on that particular site, undertaken by a very good person, Andrew Cameron Smith, and his company Wonderment from Queensland, but they came in and he's a good events guy. So we've got some solid material to work with, some good recommendations, some of which I'd already started to do without getting the report, realising that the festival needs to evolve. If there's a will to get that site organised for everybody, not just for the Flora Festival.
So just on that, it's just not you guys working. If you got expressions of interest or encouragement from the business community or related?
Yeah, certainly. I think that, yes. I mean, look, the grounds, the grounds are state government owned. Central Coast Regional Development Corp got a lot on their plate, but they're, to give them credit, they're in there. There's Thomas Delgado, a guy in there that they've appointed who's trying to work out the land and make it commercially viable, so we sell this and we can pay for that, and that's certainly where we need to go. And if we decide, we, the Central Coast people and event organisers decide, yes, we can really utilise an event park, let's get it right. I want to see it done right, not just for the Flora Festival, but camping shows, there's Oktoberfest, there's all sorts of possibilities.
There's a horrifying thought. We might stop on Oktoberfest.
Yeah, but you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
It's a site that could be well utilised.
Yeah, okay. What else is there on your plate for... Other than that's a major part, or that's a significant part, but you've been doing sporting. Yeah, well,
that's sort of one part of my role, and the other part of my role as the Business and Tourism Events Manager is to attract conference, corporate event business. And I'm very pleased to say that I must say when I started, I thought, oh gee, what are we doing? Ollie and I had a chat, and we created an events priority list that we started to get various events. Now, we might take the lead in some, council might take the lead in some, state government, sporting organisations, but to try and bring it into one place where it's centralised and we have a list, and then we can see what assistance is needed, what funding is available, what funding can be provided, was the idea. We've done that, and I'm really pleased to say that we've had a couple of really great wins. The Senior Country Rugby Union Championships is my probably defining moment, because it came down, the guys had been talking to councillors, and they'd all referred them back to me. We sat down, and I guess something that this is also is a great example of our two councils coming together and thinking regionally about...
Sometimes we forget that, Chris, don't we? That the tourism has been a focal point of a one-minded local government group for a couple of years now.
Yeah, well, yes, it has
had
been.
Some issues, I think. So.
Yeah, well, it certainly had some issues. And again, Mark, I'm a person that no matter whatever happens yesterday is yesterday, and we need to look to the future. That's there is only hope in the future. Whatever happened here, people change, and I think sometimes, and I think that happens in business, it happens in life, you get bogged down with all this stuff. It doesn't matter if we're on a little committee here or a board there. We need to be focused on the future, and the future is certainly for me, and going back to your questions, things like Country Rugby Union, because it was a great example where there is a leaning to one particular local government area where this competition is going to be played, but both councils got together and said, look, let's get this happening.
Fantastic.
So that's a great one. That's
about other sports?
Oh yeah, plenty, mate. That one there is about $1.2 million worth of economic growth. It has a social component.
When does it happen?
Happens March 2012, next year. But the other great one is the World Youth Baseball Championships. And Central Coast Baseball have, I really love this organisation. They've got a good board, and they're facing some challenges. There's some infrastructure challenges, which there is when you start to dig. There's infrastructure for here, and of course the big infrastructure like the Performing Arts Conference Centre at the Landing. There's all of these sort of things that you start to go, wow, okay. And of course all you're hearing is a bit doom and gloom because money's tight everywhere.
I come back and I will replay it to you. If there is a will,
absolutely,
we can make it happen. And the Central Coast, I think, is gaining some momentum in that area.
Well, look, I think it is. And whether we form super councils or whatever, there is, if we can have a will behind the scenes in the bureaucracy and all of that, to try to work together in various areas, even if it's not official, but behind the scenes, bureaucrats are doing that, and I see great evidence of them doing that, I've got to say. Then we're going to start to really move forward and start to attract. Now, let me tell you, Mark, I thought, like here am I, coming out of a show business sort of background, an entertainment background, and and I thought, geez, well, what do I know about tourism? Like, but then of course I realised, and this is the really important thing, we have a great show here.
We do have a great show.
We have and like all great shows, when you're in it, you can become complacent. And I've been, I was in a long-running soap opera for nearly 7 years, and you'd get into year number 4, and you'd go, I really don't know what people see in this show. And I think it's like that. I actually toured New Zealand once, and I remember going to this, how beautiful New Zealand is, got some great things. Travelling with someone, the bloke said, you wouldn't think much of this, would you? And I said, mate, it's amazing. And I think very much that's the way we are.
We had Digital Dave talk about
Digital Dave, yeah, great.
comfort level as being our biggest enemy. We are incredibly comfortable here.
Yes.
To avoid that comfort level, we won't touch your rant yet. We'll come back. And what surprised you about your new job, your management of tourism and events, do you think?
Well, I guess what maybe surprised me from being an outsider coming in is I believe how well focused Central Coast Tourism is. How, if you're talking about the organisation, the way it operates, its board is made up of, I've been in a couple of board meetings, but like all good board meetings, you don't want a nice, easy comfort. Let's hold hands and contact the living board meeting. We want to get in there and get going. So I think the board works very well with Ollie and the organisation. As far as the team goes, it's an amazing team of people, I've got to tell you, and lean. And I guess, again, having you take someone like Ollie, and we keep talking about Ollie, but fair enough, he's been a great guy. He's a new head. But when you come out of Queensland and there is money for tourism is pretty plentiful, it's hard here when you've got to really try and keep all the plates spinning, all the balls in the air to make sure that adequate funding is there. And of course, you've got to, as I said, you've got to get out of history. Whatever history was, we're now looking forward. The Central Coast is a brilliant show. It's a fantastic product. Yeah, look, like all other regions, it has its issues.
Well, I need you to focus on your rant now, because I think it might segue nicely into, this is a great show,
yes,
but...
Okay, well, this is a great show, but we need to work regionally, and I've heard a lot of talk about regionalism, and I'm on the RDA board, the Regional Australia board, but we need to have a will to work regionally, so we need to...
Is it growing?
Yes, I believe it is growing. I believe it is growing, and with change of governments and everything, when you strip away all of the politics and everything, it is growing, because there are people with vision and hearts to want to see it happen. And Mark, you've dealt, politicians, council, they all get a bagging, but hey, really, that's okay. But when you really work with some of these people, they really have a heart, and they really have a heart to see a future. I mean, you look at the landing at Gosford. Now that's visionary.
Yeah. I agree totally, Chris. I don't think we celebrate our victories enough. I don't know why we don't. But anyway, I think we've got to...
And innovation, Mark, innovation. Like we've now got movement with Anton Chris and Graham Baker and the Innovation Summit. We want to be innovative. It's funny, in a lot of ways, my experience has been the coast is 75% there in so many ways. And we have to have the will to complete it, to get this one up to 100%. And then when we get into 100%, then we want to go further. It'll
be 110. Chris, about corporate tourism, the big end of town, are we doing enough there? Can we do more?
Certainly do more. This is a big space to play in. Really big space to play in. And when you talk about corporate, we're talking about conferencing and all the things that go with that. Look, we're playing probably as well as we can. Again, the old chestnuts comes down to infrastructure. But again, we've been talking about, we've got a thing called SEGRA, which is a fantastic conference. It's being held in Geelong this year. And we've seen Central Coast Tourism, both councils, RDA, the state government, try to get together to come up with the funding to host this conference. And you've got to think a bit broader here with some of these things. This conference, yes, it'll have an economic impact, not huge, but what it brings to the region, the people it's going to bring to the region, the opportunity for our thinkers and people to get involved. So we need to think again like that. There's no doubt, and this is not an advertisement for the landing, that the landing is absolutely critical from my point of view. Having been in Sydney, having heard what they're doing in Sydney, we're going to redo Darling Harbour, Barangaroo, the entertainment centre. We need a first-class conference centre. There's no doubt about that.
Well, 320,000 people deserve it.
Absolutely, and then with the performing arts, where it is right on the water, which is quite unique in the world, that's what we need from that point of view. But then when you so in dividing my time, look, we've done the regions have got together and done some research. Got a fantastic research company to go into Sydney and talk to the PCOs. We believe. Really, that's where the personal conference organisers, event organisers, yes, and talk to them and interview them and get some research. Instead of trying to think, oh, well, what do they really want? What do they really think? Get some solid research. We've got that. It's been very interesting. Just on top of that, I represented Central Coast Tourism at the Australian Business Events Expo, along with Newcastle Hunter and Blue Mountains. We had a fantastic site, brilliant site, right opposite the winning site, as it turned out, so that was quite good. And it was amazing for me to get out there and start to engage with potential buyers, PCOs from locally, but certainly Sydney. That's where our best hope, I believe, is. And it's funny because often in our business everyone talks about the Hunter Valley, and that's understandable. But when you're face to face with these people, I love the Central Coast.
Absolutely.
Gee, but I haven't been there for years. Well, like, what have you got up there? Have you got the hotels? Have you got this? Yes, we're not going to be able to do 1,000 conference. We'll be flat out doing 500. PAX conferences, people conferences with the various things they want. But there's some niche markets there and we've developed that. So that research told us exactly where we need to go. Yeah. Sport, sporting tourism, competitions. I've just attended the last weekend, the Rugby Sevens. Fantastic competition.
Great effort.
Great effort from one. We're talking about a guy that has a heart.
We've interviewed Craig.
You know what, Craig? Like, you can't believe this guy, has got a heart to do it. Where there's hearts like that, we need to get in behind him, and he's engaged a lot of great stakeholders to move that forward. But touch football, baseball. I mean, there's an opportunity for us, Mark, to be the baseball capital of Australia, and it won't take a lot. It'll take some reasonable infrastructure, with an opportunity to have sustainable economic impact. With some of these competitions, they do, the baseball do the Coasties competition. Yeah. I went down there this year, couldn't believe it. There's kids going everywhere. They stay for a week. Yeah, all of that. So my efforts really, and now it's starting to evolve. So where I thought on our priorities list, I think Ollie was talking about 20 or 30 to start with. We're up to 40 plus, and now they're coming in. And I guess it's fair to say too, and this is where we really need the will to come together, because other regions are just like ours, experience difficulty in funding. But where we do focus, and we should focus on attracting business, because that's mega, there's actually, you would be surprised that an under whatever championship that has 800 players, or some of the touch football ones, some of the surf, there's a surf live, 8,000 competitors.
They do.
You start to do the numbers of the National Visitor Survey data, and you're talking millions. Millions of impact, plus, and I think this is really important, there's a social component. Yeah. It's going to improve facilities on the coast. Well, for me, I don't know. I know I'm Tasmanian, but it seems pretty obvious to me.
We should finish on that point. You're a Tasmanian.
I absolutely am a Tasmanian. I'm proud of it.
Thank you for your time. We'll be back in touch, and every time you've got some news, we're excited about delivering it to the business people of the coast anyway.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.